I had swept that floor for 9 days before I understood I had been sweeping it all my life. The work was simple, and that was why they had given it to me. I came off the supply skiff with a satchel and a name that meant nothing to anyone, and the steward who met me at the lower gate looked at my hands the way men look at tools, to see what they were good for. My hands were good for almost nothing. I could not read the old script that ran in bands around the columns. I could not sing the morning round the way the Vale novices sang it, low and braided, so that the sound seemed to come up out of the stone instead of down from their throats. I could lift, and I could carry, and I could clean. So they gave me a broom of bound reeds and a soft cloth and a clay lamp with a wick I was to trim each dawn, and they told me to keep the lower hall, and to keep it quiet, and to keep out of the way of those who came to remember. I want to set down before anything else what the place was, because if you have not stood in it you will think I am only describing a building, and it was not a building any more than a heart is a fist of meat. The Vale called it the Anun, which their oldest tongue rendered as the kept place, or the held place, or, if you wanted to be exact about it, the place where what is gone is not let go. It stood on a plateau above a pale, dry valley, and the morning came at it across 100 miles of nothing, so that the first light arrived already old and level and golden. The way light is when it has crossed a great distance to get to you. The hall was raised stone, vaulted so high that the ceiling held its own weather, a faint haze under the arches where the warm air gathered. Tall windows ran the length of both walls, narrow and pointed, and at certain hours the sun came through them in long blades and laid itself down across the floor in stripes, and the dust I had raised with my broom turned to slow gold in the light and hung there as if it had nowhere it would rather be. And down the center of the hall in their thousands stood the stones. Memory stones, the Vale called them, though they were not all stone and not all standing. Some were tall dark slabs taller than a man, faceless and smooth. Some were low and round like sleeping animals. Some were no bigger than a loaf and rested in carved niches in the wall, and a Vale would come and sit before one of those small ones for half a day, not touching it, only sitting, the way you sit with someone who is ill. I did not understand them then. I understood only that they were the reason for the place, and that I was to dust them and otherwise leave them be, and that when a Vale was sitting with one I was to take my broom to the far end of the hall and make no sound. At the heart of it all was the well. I should tell you about the well plainly, because everything that happened turns on it, and because for 9 days I thought it was the one dead thing in a living place. It sat in the very center of the hall under the highest part of the vault, a round basin of dark stone the width of a thrashing floor, its rim worn down at the lip to a soft curve, the way a step is worn by feet. It was full of water. The water was black, not dirty but deep, the black of a thing that goes down further than light will follow, and it was still. I have stood beside the sea, and I have stood beside mountain tarns at dead of night with no wind, and I tell you I had never seen water as still as the water in that well. Nothing moved on it. No skin of dust gathered, though dust gathered on everything else in that hall and gave me my work. No reflection sat in it. You could lean over the rim with the great gold windows blazing behind you and the bright vault above you, and the water gave you back nothing at all, not your face, not the light, not even a paler black where the brightness should have fallen. It took the light and kept it and showed you none of it back. Looking into it was like looking into the side of a thought you cannot finish. The Vale did not sit before the well. They did not touch it. The novices, when they passed it on their way to the small stones, made a gesture with the back of the hand turned outward, a gesture I came to learn meant grief that has gone quiet with age, the grief you no longer cry but still keep. They passed it the way you pass a grave so old that no one living recalls the name on it, and yet you cannot make yourself walk over it. On my first morning, before I had been told any of this, before I knew what the well was, I walked up to its rim with my cloth in my hand to wipe the dust from the stone lip, because that was my work and the lip was stone, and stone gathered dust. And as I bent to it, my hand moved on its own. I have turned this over 1,000 times since, and I can only tell it the way it happened. My hand laid the cloth flat against the rim and drew it along the curve sunwise, from the side where the morning came around toward the side where it left, in one long unhurried sweep, and then lifted, and set down again a hand's breadth on, and drew again, sunwise, the same long sweep, and I felt in my shoulder and my wrist the particular tiredness of having done a thing 10,000 times, the easy boredom of a motion worn smooth, and a thought came up in me clear as a struck bell. The thought was, the third one along always wants doing twice. I straightened up so fast my back cracked. There was no third one along. There was nothing along. It was a round rim of plain dark stone, and I had been in that hall the length of one breakfast. But I looked down where my eye had already gone, to a place on the rim, a third of the way around to my right, and there the stone was worn a shade brighter than the rest, rubbed pale, as if for a very long time a cloth had passed over that one spot more often than any other, drawn twice where elsewhere it was drawn once. I told myself I was tired off the skiff. I told myself the body learns a room faster than the mind, that this was only that. I finished the rim, the whole long way around, sunwise, and at the bright worn place I drew the cloth twice without deciding to, and the second pass settled something in me the way scratching settles an itch, and I was ashamed of the relief of it and did not understand why I should feel either the itch or the relief. That was the first day. By the third day, I knew the hall the way you know a house you grew up in. I knew that the fourth window from the north end let its blade of light fall first, a quarter-hour before its neighbors, because of some lean in the old stone. I knew that the floor sloped a hair toward the east wall so that if you spilled water it would creep that way, and I knew it before I spilled any, knew it in my feet as I walked, leaning into a grade my eyes told me was not there. I knew which of the tall slabs would be cold to the back of my hand and which would be strangely warm, warm as a sleeping body, though I could not have told you why a stone should hold heat that way, and the veil, when much later I asked, could not tell me either. They only knew which were the warm ones as I did, and they had spent their lives learning it, and I had spent 3 days. I did not speak of this to anyone. Who would I have told? The veil were kind to me in the distant way you are kind to a beast that does good work, and there were a few other humans on that world, drifters like me, taken on at the kitchens and the cisterns and the lower gates, but we did not gather, we humans. We had no gathering left in us. I will say this once and plainly because it bears on everything. We were a scattered people. I do not mean scattered as a fleet is scattered by a storm and then reforms. I mean scattered as ash is scattered, so that no two grains remember they were ever the same fire. We turned up across a dozen veil worlds and the worlds of 3 other peoples besides, always at the bottom of the work, always good with our hands and quiet at our tables, and we did not keep our own histories because somewhere far back the keeping of them had stopped, and a thing not kept does not last. I did not know the name of my grandmother's mother. I did not know what world my line had come up from, or whether it was a world at all. I knew my mother, who cleaned the long galleries of a transit station and who, I remembered now with the hall pressing it up out of me, used to wipe our one good table sunwise. From the side the lamp stood on around to the far side and back, in long unhurried sweeps, and who drew the cloth twice over the near right corner every time without ever once, in all my watching of her, knowing that she did it. That memory of my mother and the table came to me on the 5th night, and I lay on my cot off the kitchen and did not sleep, because I could feel the shape of the well's rim in my hands as plainly as if I held it, and I could feel my mother's hand inside mine making the motion, and her mother's inside hers, going back, a column of hands, all making the one sweep sunwise twice at the worn place, and I did not know how I could feel a thing I had no right to know. On the 9th day the water stirred. I had finished the small stones along the east wall and come to the well last, as I always did now, saving it the way you save the part of a task you cannot help but linger over. The morning was full. The blades of light lay across the floor and the dust hung gold in them, and the high vault held its faint warm haze. And the hall was empty but for me, the novices being away at their low singing in the round room beyond the north arch, so that the sound of it came to me thinned by distance and stone, more felt than heard. I bent to the rim with my cloth. I drew it sunwise, the long sweep, and the worn place came up under my hand, and I drew it twice. And on the second pass, as I leaned out over the black water to reach the far curve of the lip, I saw my reflection in the well. I want to be careful here because this is the hinge of it, and I have heard since how the story is told by those who were not there, and they make it sudden, a flash, a marvel. It was not sudden. It came the way dawn comes, which is to say it had already begun before I noticed it had begun. There was my face in the black water. Then I understood that there had never once been a face in that water, not mine, not anyone's, that the well took the light and gave nothing back, and that I was therefore looking at a thing that could not be there, and the understanding did not frighten me, which frightens me now to recall. It did not frighten me because the face in the water was doing what I was doing, leaning, holding a cloth, and behind it the gold light fell exactly as the light fell behind me, and it was so plainly only my reflection, so ordinary, so much the thing a still pool ought to give, that my first feeling was not wonder but a small foolish relief, as if a friend long silent had finally spoken and said only good morning. Then the face in the water was not quite mine. The light behind it had changed. Where my windows blazed gold, the windows behind the face had gone a colder white, a different hour, a different season of the same hall, and the face that leaned over the rim was a woman's face but older than mine, lined at the eyes, and her hair was bound the way I did not bind mine, and she held a cloth as I held a cloth, and she drew it sunwise as I drew it, and I watched her draw it twice at the worn place, and she lifted her eyes from her work and looked, it seemed to me, straight up out of the water into my own, and her lips moved, and though no sound came up out of the black water, I understood the shape of what she said, because it was a shape my own mouth knew. She said, "The third one along always wants doing twice." I did not drop the cloth. I have wondered since why I did not drop it and run. I think it was because the work had its own gravity by then, 9 days of it laid down in my hands, and a body in the middle of a motion it has done 10,000 times does not easily stop. So I went on wiping the rim, sunwise, all the long way around, while in the water below my hands the faces came. They came one behind another like beads slipping along a thread. After the lined woman there was a man, broad-shouldered, a burn scar down one cheek, drawing the cloth. After him a girl no older than 12, on her toes to reach the far rim, drawing it twice. After her an old man so bent he wiped the lip from a stool. After him a woman heavy with child who set one hand flat in the small of her back as she leaned. After her and him and the small one and the one with the gray streak. And on, faster now, the water giving them up the way a deep breath gives up everything it held. 100 faces, and then I stopped counting, every one of them human, every one of them at the rim of this well with a cloth in hand, every one of them drawing the long sweep sunwise and twice at the worn place, and every one of them as they passed, lifting their eyes from the work to look up out of the water into mine, into the face of the one who was wiping the rim now, and not one of them was surprised to find me there. I understood then, kneeling on the cold floor with the gold light stripping my back, and the whole drowned line of them rising past my hands, that I had not been recognizing the room. The room had been recognizing me. I did not hear the novices stop singing. I learned later they had felt it before they could have seen it, a change in the hall like the change in a house when someone wakes in a far room, and they had come, all of them, down the length of the hall behind me, and were standing in a loose half-ring at a respectful distance, not daring to come closer, and I was so deep in the water and the faces that I did not know they were there until one of them made a sound. It was not a word. It was the sound a person makes when a thing they had given up on does not, after all, stay lost, the sound that is half out before you can shape it into anything, and it broke the surface of my attention, and I looked up. The eldest of them, a Vale whose name in their tongue meant something like the one who tends the small stones, was on her knees. They do not kneel, the Vale. Their joints are not made for it, and their pride is not made for it either. They are an upright, level-eyed people. She was on her knees on the stone with her long hands pressed flat to the floor, and her face was turned up to me. And down her face, in the gold light, ran the slow shine of grief that has after all not gone quiet, that has only been waiting a very long time for somewhere to go. For a while no one moved. The water below me had gone still again, black again, holding nothing. But I knew now that it was not dead, that it had never been dead, that it had only been the way a watchdog is still when its one person is far from home, ears up the whole long time and giving nothing to anyone else who comes to the gate. The eldest spoke. Her common tongue was careful and old. She said, "The well has shown nothing since before my grandmother's grandmother." She said, "We keep it because our mothers kept it. We do not know how to wake it. We had forgotten that it could be woken." She looked at my hands where they still rested on the rim, and she said, very quietly, in the way you ask a question you are afraid to have answered, "How did you know to do that?" And I told her the truth, which was that I had not known anything, that my hand had done it on its own from the first morning, that I had thought myself only tired and strange, that the worn place wanted the cloth twice, and I could not have said why, that my mother had wiped a poor table the same way on a transit station a galaxy from here, and had never known she did it. I heard my own voice saying all this, and it sounded to me like someone reading aloud a story they did not write. The eldest closed her eyes. When she opened them, she got up off her knees slowly, with the help of a younger one's arm, and she stood looking at me for a long moment, and then she did a thing I did not understand until later. She turned to the gathered novices and the Vale who had come in from the lower halls, a crowd now, filling the gold-striped center of the great room, and she said a single word in the old tongue, and the word ran back through them in a murmur, and the murmur was full of that same first sound, the sound of the not after all lost, and many of them put the backs of their hands to their faces, palm out, the grief gesture, but they were not making it at the well now. They were making it at me. I learned what the word meant that evening, when the eldest took me into the round room beyond the north arch where the small singing was done, and gave me water in a bowl and food I did not have to carry or clean, and told me, as plainly as she could, what I had walked into. I will give it to you as she gave it to me, though she gave it across a whole night and many silences, and I have said it in order since. The Vale, she said, are a people who die twice. We die as all things die when the body stops, and we die again when the last one who remembers us forgets, and the second death is the one we fear, for it is final, and a people who lets its dead die the second death is a people that comes apart, grain from grain, as your people have come apart, she said, with no unkindness, only the plainness of someone nomming a thing she has watched happen. Against the second death the Vale built the kept places, the Anun, and in the kept places they set the memory stones, into which a life could be laid down, the whole shape of it, so that those who came after could come and sit with the stone, and the one inside it would not be wholly gone. But the stones, she said, hold only what is laid in them, and a stone is a narrow thing, one life, one shape. There was a deeper keeping, older than the stones, and that was the well. The well, she said, did not hold one life. It held the memory of the people, not the facts of it, not the dates and the dynasties, those they wrote on the columns. It held the felt memory, the live thing, the grief and the morning light and the sound of a particular voice that has been gone 1,000 years, and when a Vale could no longer bear the second death of someone they loved, when the stone was not enough, they came to the well, and the keeper drew the memory up out of the water and gave it back to them for an hour, whole and breathing, and they were with their dead again, truly with them, and then they let them go a little more gently than they could have otherwise. The well was how the Vale carried their grief without being crushed by it. It was the floor under the whole house of them. And the well, she said, was kept by the keepers, and the keepers were not veil. She was quiet a long time when she said that. Then she told me the part of it the veil no longer tell, because they had let it slip down into the second death along with so much else. There had been in the deep past a people who came among the veil and among other peoples too, who came not to take worlds and not to trade and not to fight, but who had in them a gift, or a craft, or only a long habit grown to a gift, the steady holding of what others let fall. They were rememberers. They could stand at a well like this one and draw the live memory up out of the dark and hold it steady in the light without letting it warp, which is harder than it sounds. For memory in the live is a wild and slippery thing and wants to twist toward how you wish it had been. The rememberers did not let it twist. They kept it true. And the well, she said, was made to wake only for them, keyed not to any office or any ceremony, but to the keeper's own hand and the keeper's own line and the long worn motion of the keeping, sunwise, twice at the worn place, passed down hand to hand, mother to child, for so long that the hand did it before the mind knew it. The keepers of this well, she said, were of that people. They lived in the lower halls. They tended the stones and they woke the well and they gave the veil back their dead for an hour at a time, generation on generation, and the veil loved them the way you love the floor you stand on, which is to say without thinking of it until it is gone. And then she said they were gone. She did not know how. That was the worst of it, she said, and she said it as a confession. There had been a long bad age, a sickness that took the lower halls hardest, or a war that came and went, and the keeper's line had thinned in it, or only the slow dwindling of a small people among a large one, the young ones drifting off to the skiffs and the far worlds, fewer hands each generation to do the keeping, until one morning the last of them was an old one alone, and then one morning the old one did not come up from the lower halls. And the veil who went down found the rooms empty and the cot cold, and they came up and went to the well and looked into it, and it gave them nothing. They wiped the rim. They did not know to draw it sunwise. They did not know about the worn place. They sang to it. They sat with it as they sat with the small stones. It gave them nothing, and went on giving them nothing, and the years went over it, and the veil who had loved the floor without thinking of it now stood on a floor that had become a grave, and in time they forgot even that the floor had ever been anything else. They kept the well because their mothers kept it. They made the grief gesture as they passed it because their mothers had made it. They no longer knew it was a grief for the keepers, for the rememberers, for the people who had held them up. They had let their keepers die the second death, she said, and her voice when she said it was the voice of someone owning a thing that cannot be made right, and that is the thing I have carried away from that whole strange country, and that I would set down hardest of all. They did not weep that the well had failed them. They wept that they had forgotten the ones who had kept it. I did not sleep that night either. Near dawn I went up alone into the great hall which was forbidden me at that hour, and I do not think anyone would have stopped me by then. The hall was gray, the light not yet come across the valley, the windows pale and waiting, the dust settled, the stones standing in their thousands in the half-dark like a held breath. I went to the well. The water was black and still and gave me nothing, but I knew now what its nothing was, and I was not afraid of it. I knelt at the rim. I did not have my cloth. I put my 2 hands flat on the worn lip, on the bright-rubbed place where 10,000 passes of 10,000 of my own had worn the stone pale, and I held them there, and I said, out loud into the dark water, the only thing I had to say, which was, "I'm sorry I'm so late." The water moved. It came up to meet my hands. I felt the cold of it climb the stone, though the water did not rise, and the black surface paled not to silver, not to reflection, but to a deep clear dark like the sky an hour after the sun is wholly down. And in that dark there began to be light, points of it, and then more. And then the points drew together into shapes, and the shapes drew together into faces, but they were not my faces now, not the keepers. They were the dead of the veil. I cannot tell you who they were, for I did not know them, but I knew that they were known, that each face rising in the water was someone's whole heart, and I understood that the well, waking under a keeper's hand at last, was doing the only thing it had ever been made to do, which was to give them back. They came up in their numbers, more than the stones, more than the columns could have named, a whole drowned people surfacing into the gray dawn light of the hall. And as the true light came at last across the valley and through the eastern windows and laid its first long gold blade across the floor and across the water, the well took that light, which for so long it had taken and kept and given to no one, and gave it back, threw it up shining off the faces of the veiled dead, and the hall that had been a grave was full of them. Full of light and the dead and the dust hanging gold, and the living veil, who had felt it again before they could have known it and were coming down the hall behind me in a flood now, walked into the company of their own dead and were, for the first time in an age that had no number with them. I stayed at the rim with my hands on the stone, and I held it true. I did not have to be taught how. It was the easiest thing I have ever done, and the only thing I have ever been entirely sure I was made for. I held the memory steady and did not let it twist toward how anyone wished it had been, kept it whole and breathing and true. And one by one, the veil came to the rim beside me and looked down and found the face they had been making the grief gesture at for their whole lives without knowing whose it was. And the eldest came last, and looked, and made a sound I will not try to write, and was with whoever it was she had lost so long ago that the loss had become only a gesture of the hand, and was with them truly. And then, after a while, with my hands holding it steady, let them go, a little more gently than she could have otherwise. When the light was full and the well had given back all it had to give for that morning and gone quiet under my hands, quiet but not dark now, never dark again, the surface settled, and in the last of the settling it showed one more thing, and showed it only to me, leaning close, my own 2 hands on the worn place. It showed the keepers. Not one behind another this time, threaded on grief. All of them at once, the whole long line of my line, the lined woman and the burn-scarred man and the girl on her toes and the bent old one, and the woman heavy with child and my mother at her poor table a galaxy away and her mother and hers and back beyond counting, all of them in the water at once, and at the front of them where the newest always stands, my own face looking back up out of the dark, and over all of it, not in sound, for the well does not make sound. But in the deep certain way the well had spoken to me from the first morning through my own moving hand, it gave me 4 words. They were not welcome. They were not maker, nor queen, nor any of the great cold titles. They were the plain truth of where I was and what I was, the thing the floor had been saying under my feet for 9 days, the thing the worn place had been saying under my cloth, the thing the cold rim and the warm stones and the level dawn light had all of them been saying in the only language a kept place has, and at last, with a keeper's hand on it to give it shape, it could say in words, "We kept your place, keeper." They had, the whole long dark age, while the veil forgot and the columns gathered dust and my own scattered people forgot even that we had been anything, the well had not forgotten. It had kept my place. It had stayed still and given nothing to anyone, not because it was dead, but because it would not pretend that anyone else's hand was the hand it waited for. It had held the office empty rather than fill it falsely. It had done, in the dark for an age, the exact thing it existed to do, which is to keep what is gone and not let it go, and the thing it had been keeping, all that time under everything else, was the place at the rim that was mine. I had thought, those 9 days, that I was a stranger who happened to know a room. I had thought the recognition ran from me outward, that I was the one doing the knowing. I had it backward, the way you have everything backward until the morning the light comes across the valley and lays it straight. I was not recognizing the well. The well was recognizing me, had recognized me from the first morning, from the first sunwise sweep of a borrowed cloth, and the strangeness I had felt, the knowing of the floor and the light and the worn place, the certainty in my hands that frightened me, all of it was only the well's long, patient memory of every keeper who had ever stood where I stood, surfacing into the one keeper who had finally come back. The deja I had felt was not mine. It was the well's. It was a kept place, remembering its keeper, and pressing that remembering up through my hands until I could no longer call it strange. I am the keeper of the Anun now. The veil do not call me sweeper anymore, though I still sweep, because the floor still gathers dust, and a keeper is not too good to keep her own house. Each morning before the light comes across the valley, I go to the rim with my cloth and I draw it sunwise, the long, unhurried sweep, all the way around, and at the worn place I draw it twice, and I do not have to remind myself to do it, for my hand has done it 10,000 times in 10,000 hands before mine, and will, if I keep it as it was kept for me, do it in 10,000 after. The veil come to the well now as their mothers came, and I draw their dead up out of the dark and hold them steady and true and give them an hour, and help them let go a little more gently than they could otherwise, and that, it turns out, is what my people were for. Not the great cold things. Not conquest, not empire, not the breaking of anything. We were the ones who held what others could not bear to lose and could not bear to keep. We were the floor under the house. We let our own keeping stop, somewhere far back, and we paid for it, grain from grain. A people that forgot it had ever been a fire. But the keeping does not need many. It only needs one hand at a time, and the willingness to come when you are late, and the well will wait. I know now how long a well will wait. I have written this down in the old plain way, sunwise across the page, so that it will be kept. If you are reading it, you may be one of the scattered, as I was, doing the bottom of the work somewhere with hands that are good for almost nothing anyone has thought to name. If you ever come to a quiet place and find your hand moving on its own, drawing some long-worn motion you were never taught, and a certainty rises in you that frightens you, that you have been here before though you have only just come, do not call it strange and do not run. Kneel down. Put your 2 hands on the worn place. Say you are sorry you are so late. Something has been keeping your place.